All right, let's go ahead and start. I have so much to do with you today, and I know we have a lot of things here. Announcements-wise, this is actually kind of a very dead time. This is our lowest attending Sunday of the year, will be this week. It is every year. If you knew Lee Norman gets statistics of every single Sunday of every single thing of ever, and statistically, this is Memorial Day Sunday is always a low Sunday. Can't tell you why. Labor Day Sunday is also the same thing. So it's always randomly to these two deals. News-wise, other than sign up for Vacation Bible School, there's really nothing that we really have that you need to sign up for. If you are volunteering or if you want to be able to volunteer, go to vbsmanager.com and you can be able to go there. Two things that were added today. If you want to provide a meal for a meal train for the Dotsons or for the Kayleys, that's Austin and Hadley's baby, and Grace and Colin's baby, you can be able to use these QR codes and you can be able to provide those if you want to. I'll put it back here because I know I'll lose it and I'll put it somewhere that it shouldn't be. But if you want to serve and be able to give them a meal, that is great. Today, we will talk about the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. Before we even start, I want you to hear me say this. I do not like Catholics. Most of the time, anytime we talk about this, they think this is what's going on. They're in this time period, and we are talking about a time period that is Middle Ages. Now, Middle Ages can range based on who's calling the shots. Most of the time, they would call the Middle Ages from about 800 to about the Renaissance period, about the 1300s. But when you think about the Middle Ages is very much stuck. Now, in the Middle Ages, we have feudalism. Feudalism is when we have kings and queens. We have people who are going to be lords who are over certain lands, who watch the certain lands. You got the castle time period. For some of you who enjoy, especially traveling, you would travel to Europe to see these monuments. The monuments that are going to be built during the medieval period, the Middle Ages, any of these things. This is the kind of era that we're going to be talking about and we're going to be looking at. What I want you to keep mindful of is that we are covering this to get to the Reformation. So to understand where Protestantism comes from. This is the main purpose of all of this history is to understand where our thoughts and beliefs come from. Now, for us to understand how the Bible was written, then we would have to go through a whole new history lesson. Another history lesson we would go to, we could also learn about like the Trinity and like the making of the new doctrines. To be honest with you, those are not the most fascinating ones there are. There's a lot of scandals in these. These are why they're a whole lot more fun. You get to have, when we get to English Reformation, you have people being beheaded, a lot of wives and a lot of men and women and people burned at the stake, a lot of things like this. But this is the Roman Catholic Church. If you have your notes, we're going to go through every bit of this one piece at a time. Again, the reason why I'm giving you this, and you're going to get to see me, last 2 or 3 times you saw me talk about this, we went really, really fast. We went through an outline because I kind of need you to kind of have an idea of when we're talking about. This is in the Iron Age. We are very good with iron, so if you think technologically, we maybe have catapults, if you were going to say this. We barely understand how to go to the bathroom, like in a latrine in some ways. Some castles had that, some castles did not have that. We were not as well educated on how to do hygiene, especially medically. Doctors didn't really know what they were doing, especially at this time. So there's a lot of stuff like this that are very, very different. In number 1, it says there the Great Schism. And so 1054 AD, the Western Church of Rome became the dominant Christian power of Europe. So when we look at this, and I want you to see, if we look at Europe as a whole, and we look at all of it, we have a schism between here is Rome, and some of you are really good with maps and geography. Some of you are horrible with it. Listen to me, I'm not here to hate on you. I want to help you, okay? This right here is Constantinople, okay? Now, the way it would divide is that this would become Eastern Christian empire. This would become the Western Christian empire. They broke apart because they disagreed about icons or even the way that parts of the Bible was written. There were different phrases that were actually that they fought over. But you can see here, this right here is the Byzantine Empire. It says it right here, the Byzantine Empire. This is Eastern Rome. It was created right here at Constantinople by Constantine. We talked about that last time. This is near and even closer to all of where, and then again in the 600s, this is where Islam, this is where Muhammad would have started. They'd have started down here, way down here in this far, far region down here. And if you look down there, now I kind of want to help you as time goes on. I want you to think about this. You've probably heard of Genghis Khan, right? Even his son. They were very strong rulers. They came from right across the top here, and they took over most of this area during this time. You do have the Russians, the Rus. Right here you have Kiev. Kiev is the main home place of where Vladimir the Great actually came from. So the reason why I'm telling you this stuff is that there are somewhat what we believe in today as countries, but there's no countries. These are kingdoms. So in this era, and we're starting around, let's say around 1100, this is a map from 1176. This would have been what the world would have looked like. So you would have had Rome. Again, Rome is going to be the main place where the Pope is going to be. You're going to have Rome. Most of the Byzantine Empire is falling apart. It's falling apart because Islam is coming, and it's coming for it. Islam is also coming from Africa, and it will take over almost all of Spain. And so you'll have this. The Battle of Tours, where Charles the Hammer fights back, and he actually pushes the Moors out of Spain, and he's able to do those things. But that's never here or there. But I kind of want you to see, this is the line. This is the line from the Hungary, from the Hungarian kingdom, all the way up. This is, and I would say, everything above this and everything above this, this is your Christian empire. This is where the Christianity would have reigned. This, again, this becomes Islam. This over here is Islam. And so you see that in those areas. But you start to have this. So the main factors, and I want you to kind of think about the world. The world would have been the Spain area. It would have been this right here, the Holy Roman Empire, which is most of your northern Italy and all your Germany. This right here would actually belong to the Byzantine Empire, but after the Byzantine Empire fell apart, the Sicilians, this kingdom of Sicily actually was by itself. You actually also have another kingdom here of Venice. Venice was its own kingdom at this time. It stayed its own kingdom at this time, and it stayed its own world. France was its own. France was very strong, still is very strong. And France actually worked a lot with Scotland because it hated England. If you've seen Braveheart, you know why, right? You've seen those things. And so then you have England, and then you had Ireland that was by itself. So these would have been the main areas. Most of these areas were led by tribes. They will get more together towards the end of like where the era we get to, like in the 1500s. You're going to see that Lutheranism will very much flood into here. You're also going to see that most of this area here then will become very little Roman Catholic. So this is staunch Roman Catholic. Okay, if I was to say, if you were to ask me where's the most Roman Catholic place in the world, you would ask me, and you probably would say Italy. I would say no, even to today. Anybody know where it would be? The most Roman Catholic place? France. France always was, and it somewhat still is. If you were to go in France, you would have some of the greatest and most beautiful cathedrals there were. France is where most of the emperors lived. So imagine this. The popes live here. Okay? Popes live here. But like you would have a king that would live not really in Paris. They usually would live outside of Paris, like where you see like the city of Versailles. You see where Versailles is not in Paris, it's outside of Paris. Even out here you would have Avignon. We will talk about Avignon in just a minute. It's down in there. Right here is another. There's multiple places in Paris there is. Then you would have England. You would have where London would be. And then in the Holy Roman Empire, Cologne, a lot of different places that are going to be in there. Now this Spain is a whole different animal that we don't need to talk about. But I kind of want you to see there is a difference between what these things do and what these things are. So when you think about this, that's why it's so important that you kind of have an essence of like where we're actually at. It is important that we kind of see like what's going on in these worlds and what's going on where we're actually pointing at. So the first thing you have, if you look there, it says, I want you to say number 2. I'm still on number 1. Let's go to number 1 again. Number 1, the second one, number 1 is the Pope's authority grew both through religion and politics. So there's 2 main heads of the world. There's the emperors and there's the Pope. The popes, an average pope, even to today, lasts usually around 7 to 9 years. There's been like 200 popes. And those popes last for a certain amount of time, and usually they were elected by government officials, and then it changed to church officials. It wasn't always through church officials, but I say this because there will be a time that it's so corrupt that you couldn't figure out what was the difference between a government and a religious figure because they became so entrenched with one another. But the Pope grew because the Pope grew strong because Rome, when there were the bishops of the 12 different ecumenical councils, that when those councils actually started to grow, the Roman Pope would always vote last. The Roman Pope would always be the one that would choose to do what was the end. So the Roman Pope had more power due to being from Rome. He positioned himself to do that. So the Pope over time, now I want you to hear me say that the Pope is the vicar of Christ. He's the mouthpiece of Christ. He's the main. There is nothing like it's through the Pope that we can be saved because he is taking Peter's seat, who is supposed to be the rock of the church in their view, which we believe that Christ is the rock of the church. But they say that Peter's the rock of the church, that it's through the church that you are saved. Not through your relationship with Jesus, your relationship with the church that you were saved. So there's difference in that compared to especially Protestantism that we believe in today. The third one on number 1, this sets the stage for a powerful centralized church. The church has more power than emperors. You will see that popes can actually excommunicate, which means that they kick them out of heaven and kick them out of the church. If you get kicked out of the church, you get kicked out of heaven. And so that's what that would be. They can actually excommunicate, and they actually can kick out. There will be some corrupt popes in just a minute that we will actually talk about who actually hire people to kill other people. And there are things like that do happen. So you'll see some of that stuff. The number 2, the Crusades. Now this is very important because you have to understand, this is when the church or the popes learned how to do certain things. In this time period, there was not the 7 sacraments. Now, we have 2 sacraments. We have baptism and we have the Lord's Supper, okay? They call the Lord's Supper the Eucharist, okay? But they have 7 sacraments now. They've had sacraments pretty well all the way since Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas was very important. We'll talk about him in a minute. But when you think about this, in this time period, during the Crusades, the popes would tell people, if you make this pilgrimage, if you're willing to go and fight to win back the Holy Land, then you would get a pardon. You could be able to be forgiven of sins. This is where the word indulgences come from. Indulgences are a way to have the removal of temporal sin that's in your life. So imagine that if you could do something, you could come up and ask me as the pastor of the church, hey, is there something I can do to make God forgive me for, cheating or speeding on the way here? And I would tell you, well, you do 10 Hail Marys and maybe go and maybe give some money to the church or spend some time here, and it would just depend on what it would be. And that's still in practice today. That's still in practice today, especially if you were to do a visceral sin, then you're immediately out. You wouldn't be able to get back into heaven. You would be in trouble. And so there's different types of sins especially what was taught during this time. The Crusades, look there, it says the Crusades, you see the time period. There were multiple Crusades. Depending on I think this only shows, 4 Crusades? 4 Crusades were the main ones. There probably was up to 8 to 9 Crusades that actually happened. They just didn't make it very far. Some of them didn't even get to anywhere near the Holy Lands. They died or sputtered out before they even got to Greece. So it depends. You got to remember, as they were going this way, the Islam was coming this way. So if they ran into the wrong band, they could get killed before they even get to the Holy Lands very, very easily. Those are the ones that we actually know that got pretty far. You'll have Richard the Lionheart, historical figures that are found in there. Anyway, you don't need to know any of that stuff, but I just think it's kind of cool. The popes promised spiritual reward for those who fought and died. They actually would release prisoners from prison, or people who were on death row, or people who were, bad guys, and they would say, the Pope would say, or people would say, if you want to earn your salvation back or good sought things in the church, then you can be able to go. Now, one kind of theology also came from this, would have been purgatory. That we would start to see that we start to have purgatory theology starting to come out. Purgatory theology, which I got to study a couple weeks ago, came from the book, The Maccabees, in chapter 12. In chapter 12, it talks about how they prayed for the soldiers that had died. As they prayed for them, that they would be able to go straight to heaven. And being able to go straight to heaven, now again, that's not in our Bible, but it is in something called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha is the Bible that the Catholics use. They have 7 extra books than we do. They did not put those books into when the book that they use as the Bible in this time was called the Latin Vulgate. It has 66 books just like ours does. They, as the popes and those who were in charge of the church, they used those extra books as if they were in the Bible. They weren't, but they used them to be able to justify a lot of things that they were able to do. And so there are some things that you see that you're going, where did that come from? They took it from one obscure verse and took it a little bit too far. And that is, again, that's eisegesis. That's when we add to the Bible, where it's not exegesis, where we pull from the Bible and explain what it means. When you add to, you can't do that. That would be bad hermeneutics. Then it says the church helped raise funds from bishops, clergy, and laymen. They blended salvation, fear, and finances in a way that would found troubling. So to do all of this, they started to tax people. They would have tax collectors that would go and they would be able to, that would pay. If you wanted to be able to earn salvation, or if you did something wrong in a social status, all you had to do this. Now, I want you to imagine, you and me at this time probably wouldn't be able to read. We wouldn't be able to go and understand the Bible. We would go to a church service. We would sit in a mass where they would do the Eucharist. And that Eucharist was so important that if we got in trouble and we weren't allowed to go and have and partake in the Eucharist, then we weren't be able to commune with God. Because in the Eucharist, it was such an important thing that if they took the bread, that was the real body of Christ. If they were to take the blood, it would be the real blood of Christ. And we'll explain that in just a minute too. But I want you to see this, this is important. It starts with the Crusades and it keeps going. The 7 sacraments, even today, and it would probably have been established for sure in the Council of Trent. We'll get to the Council of Trent when we talk about it. But the 7 sacraments, again, baptism, and now it's infant baptism, okay? It would be confirmation, where if someone who says, okay, now I want to be a believer at maybe a teenager age, or maybe even at a 20-year-old age, or even as an adult, if you want to come and convert, you would be then confirmed. And then it would be the Lord's Supper. Now, again, the Lord's Supper is a lot different than ours. Our Lord's Supper is through symbolism, and we believe that is, do this in remembrance of me, and we do this as a symbol. They believe it's actually the true blood and the true body of Christ, that it becomes God. Confession, the anointing of the sick, holy orders, and matrimony. These are 7 sacraments. If you do these 7 sacraments, you're only going to help your way to heaven. You're only going to help your way, build your case so that you can be able to go into heaven and not have any issues. This would get you maybe not spending so much time in purgatory after you died. but this is what it would require. This is what it would be. So this is where it would come. Any questions on that? There's always questions on this. Yes, sir.
What is
Holy orders would be only for the clergy. This would be for the clergy. For the clergy would be the only ones who would take holy orders. Good question. But yeah, that's what it would be. So again, just adding another badge like to my resume, but there's no badge added to my resume based on what we believe as Protestants. It is that we are all equal at the foot of the cross. There's no one who has a higher seat or closer to the cross than anyone else does. We're all equal in the eyes of the Lord. So what you see here, this is what I want you to see. It's like a system. It's like this machine. And what people do, and I want you to hear me, they are not learning the Bible, they're learning the tradition. They're not learning the Bible, they're learning the church. So how are they saved? Not by grace through faith. They're saved by, is the church, am I in good standing with the church? Have I sinned? Have I confessed? Have I taken the Eucharist? Can I do these things in the right way? It's through the church that salvation is done, not through the grace through faith. Because that idea, just to say that, is an absolute heresy to say that at this time. Because they believe it takes faith plus the works to be able to earn your way to heaven. For you to hold that Bible in your hand, that would even be against the law at this time. You weren't allowed to have it. It wouldn't be in your language, and you wouldn't be able to understand it because you wouldn't be smart enough to understand it. But what did we talk about last time? What did the church do that was great? It educated the common man. Through the education of common men, men start to pick up books. They start to pick up books, and that's what the Renaissance period is really all about. The Renaissance period is really all about that they start picking up old books, like books that, Aristotle and Socrates and things like this read. But they were said, hey, you can read all these books, but you can't read the Bible. But then some of the men, they would go to schools like Oxford and Cambridge, and they would actually start to learn Latin. And they were able to get a book. They were able to get a Bible. And they were able to read it. And when those men were able to read it, they were saying, when these men speak to us, that's not exactly true. You can see how this is just building that animosity and that belief of that. So in the basic beliefs, look at what it says. The Pope is seen as the head of the church on earth. Salvation is believed to come through the church and its sacraments. So if you are able to go to the church and have the Eucharist, you're able to go to Mass and experience this, you're okay with God. But if you ever do a sin or you do something you're not allowed to go to get the Eucharist, you are not okay with God and your salvation is in jeopardy. And that would be what it would be. The key sacraments, baptism, again, infant baptism, where you are brought into the family of God. Confession and Eucharist. Purgatory and prayers for the dead became a major doctrine. It also became a major way to make money. Through indulgences, and we'll see this, if somebody had passed away, like if your son or your daughter had passed away, maybe at an early age, or maybe they were not a very good person, you could give enough money to the church, you could be able to do enough, or have enough, whatever you were able to do, like a pilgrimage, if you were able to do that thing, you could maybe get them out of purgatory, and maybe God would grant them. The only person you can actually save is you. But you really can't even do that very well either. So at the end of the day, it's going to be, when it comes down to it, the only person you know who's really saved is you. And so, but this kind of gave that ability to try to say, you might have this power. You might have this ability, even after they die, that maybe God would see how sweet we are and what it would be, and he could do those things. And so the indulgences later turned into forgiveness and merit, into a complicated system where many people didn't fully understand. You could just see that, especially if there was a corrupt priest, that what if I was to look at y'all going, okay, you need to give more money, and if you don't, you're going to hell. Oh, you need to go and you better volunteer for VBS. Oh, you don't want to be at the preschool? You're going to be at the preschool and you're going to feed them. And you're going to clean diapers, you're going to do these things, you're going to do this. If you don't, you're going to hell. You can see how a corrupt priest, a corrupt pope, could then hold the people with so much power, because people feared. I mean, people this time feared the Lord. They feared God. They feared things. So when the Black Plague comes and it starts sweeping across your whole entire city and people start dying, the priest would say, y'all must have done something bad. If y'all just would have listened, these things wouldn't have happened. This system created fear and control and power. Now, again, I'm not hating on anybody. I'm telling you the history of it. The messenger gets shot all the time. The next thing, the papal rule. Anytime you hear that word papacy, it's talking about the papacy, the papal rule. It will be the Pope and what they're able to do. You see here, as we see the Pope, as a picture of the Pope. What I love, what's really fun to do with me is to take me to an art museum and for me to be able to go through and tell you, I don't have a clue about the artist, but I know all about the history that those things show. And when they show things like this, you would look at this and go, oh, that's a beautiful picture of the Pope. That's not a beautiful picture of the Pope. They don't like the Pope if they draw that picture because that's too elevated. If they liked the Pope, they would show the Pope to be a very humble man. I know we have some pictures that actually would show this. That would show the Pope as way too powerful the way that's drawn. That's drawn in a very derogatory way instead of a good way. This is St. Peter's Basilica. Some of y'all I know have been there, and that's great. You can see the stretch of Rome. You start to see where Rome has this power and this hold over the kingdoms that are all throughout this. So whatever Rome says, those kings or those emperors better listen. So in this time period, the papal authority was much stronger than the emperors had even over their own land. When emperors had land, they considered it their land, but they had to do it with the blessing of the Pope. Because if the Pope did not agree or did not like it, it was that way. You see that 267 popes, duration of the papacy was based on Avignon in France, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's cool. I think it's neat to see how this works. If the Pope dies, it's 9 days that they mourn, and then they go into the council, and they're able to go in and they find out. We have one Pope from the United States. There's 200 plus of them came from Italy. And then what do you think second? France. There's your strongholds. Their strongholds are right there. Vatican City is its own city. It's the smallest country it's its own country. It's the smallest country in the entire world. You can walk around it in 40 minutes. And it is all under papal authority. What's weird about this time period is that the Pope and could own land. They could control land. They wanted control. They wanted to be able to have it. If you were to die, you could leave all your land to them, and that would get you into heaven even better. And you would have a higher seat and a less time in purgatory. So with this, look what it says on number 4. The Pope acted not only as a spiritual leader, but also as a political ruler. The Pope owned land, collected tithes, influenced kings and emperors. Pope often clashed with secular rulers, often the Holy Roman Empire. And you saw that's the one that's like Germany right there in the middle. It didn't usually with France. That's why France probably was the most loved. Then the church began to look more like a political kingdom than a spiritual shepherd. That it had power, and it had a lot of power. And so this is, again, I want you to again think about it. This is probably from about 1100 to about 1500, okay? So we're in like a 400-year time frame, 300-year time frame that we're kind of like living in this. Look what it says, the good and the bad of the Catholic rise. The good is the church preserved, the church preserved Christian teachings and stabilized Europe after the fall of Rome. Monasteries were built, and scholars kept learning manuscripts, and theology was alive. You see beautiful stuff. Like when we go to Europe, most of us go see things that we wouldn't see here. What you see there is you see architecture, the medieval architecture, where it's so incredibly detailed and all these things. And every city wanted to technically have their own little Tower of Babel. That it would be, when you walked into that city, you saw this giant building, and you saw this giant cathedral. And that cathedral was an essence of how serious this town takes their relationship with God. how much money they gave to it, how much they sculpted it, what they were able to make, what they were able to do. And this is what it would be. This is St. Peter's Basilica again in Italy, or in Vatican City. This is inside. And you could see that these are the head cardinals who would be there with the Pope as they were to go take their own Eucharist in a meeting. You can see the room in which they were doing this. This is during the Michelangelo, the Raphael, the Leonardo. This is during this time period when all these amazing painters were drawing and they were using these things. Again, these men were doing this, a lot of these men were doing this so they would earn favor with the church and also favor even after they die. So there's this thing. So if we were based on this standard, what have you done today to make God like you more? And this standard in this world is get to work, build the church, and you better go fix something in this church right now. The toilet right now, Tom. He used to. I used to have to call Tom and go like, Tom, we broke a toilet. But think about it. What you better go do it, because this is the kind of world. So it was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do enough. And then you die, and you still don't know if you actually did enough. Do you see how easy it is for some of us, even in theology today, to base it not around grace and faith, and to base it around works? Works-based religion will kill you. It's an exhausting relationship with God. You're never going to earn your salvation, ever. I don't care how good you are, how much money you give. I don't care what you do. So you could just see these people were crippled. Like they couldn't do this. They couldn't be this person. Thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, you see there on that right there underneath the good. Thomas Aquinas was great. He was terrific. He was one of the most amazing minds, even as like a young man. Like he was 17 years old when he basically was almost done with all the book that he's so most famous for. But he created a lot of the theology that's in the Catholic Church and made it really messed up. It's something called transubstantiation. Okay, it's a mouthful. Transubstantiation is the explanation through a theological systematic point of view of what it is, what happens when we take the Lord's Supper. So they believe that when they take the cup and they drink the cup, that it actually, once it enters into your body, it then turns into the Lord's blood, turns into the bread, turns into the Lord's body. So this priests who were able to do Mass, that what they were producing when they did this, and this is where Luther would say, he was like, man, it was just so much pressure that my job was to do this service and produce the Lord. Like to make him real. And I had to be perfectly sinless. And he was like, I'm not perfectly sinless. I can't believe I'm sitting here doing this. I can't do this. And it would just wear him out. But yet, transubstantiation is the belief that this turns into the real thing of God, the real body, the real blood. And that pressure got to him. It got to a lot of them. The church became entangled with politics, worldly power. Popes and bishops often acted more like rulers and pastors. Wealth, land, luxury made the church seem more worldly than spiritual. Corruption. Simony. Simony is when you pay for a church office. Like if you give me money, I'll make you into a main church leader. I'll make you a priest over a certain town, or I'll make you this. You can actually pay for it. You don't have to be good, godly, or even know the Bible. All you have to do is just give me some money and I'll get you a spot. And you can see how that becomes real. Nepotism is like helping out your family or helping out someone else. So you basically just start to promote your family. We start to see this corruption. This is the corruption we see. Moral failure when they actually start to commit adultery, gambling. They actually hire people to commit murder. And it weakens the trust of the people. For the system increasingly controlled people through fear, guilt, and dependence on sacraments. If I'm not able to go and take the Eucharist, then I'm not okay. And this is what it would do and how it did it. So look there. I'll give you examples of some good ones. So the good ones, Gregory the First. I have them all All the ones I listed, I left it, all the good ones on this side, the bad ones on this side. Okay? This is Gregory the First. Gregory the First, look what it says. It said he emphasized missions, preaching, and the pastoral care. He is the guy who, when Attila the Hun attacked Rome, he's the one who met him out wearing all of his garb. And when he walked out, he was wearing all of his garb. And Attila the Hun was like, uh-oh, I don't want to mess with him because God might strike me down, or his God might strike me down. So I'm just going to leave them alone. So he stopped his entry into Italy because he saw this dressed up figure, and this figure was Gregory the First. The next one is Gregory the Seventh fought Simony. He fought that and pushed for a stronger clerical discipline. And he created, this the guy here, he created, basically, they need to be trained. That these men need to be trained, that these pastors, these priests is what they would be, that they need to be trained, the monks need to be trained. And we talked a little bit about monks and monasteries last time. Innocent III was a powerful pope who strengthened the papal authority and called councils. He wanted to clarify, this guy, he wanted to clarify doctrine. That was his main goal, okay? Then you got these fun guys, okay? These guys are fun. The far right guy, far top right guy. That's the most famous. If you want to look up a fun thing on the internet, look up Pope John the 12th. And if you want to enjoy some crazy stuff that this man did, he basically, this is what it says, that Pope John the 12th turned the St. Peter's Basilica and all the things that's there, that he turned it into a brothel. That this man basically committed adultery, did whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, gambled. He did, you name it, he did it. He hired men, mercenaries, to actually kill other people. This is probably the most wicked. It's very fascinating. I'm not joking. Go look up Pope John the 12th. You actually will, it's pretty wild. Alexander the Sixth, he's this one, Alexander the Sixth. What does it say? It says he was known for nepotism, in other words, hooking up all of his family with all those different things, political scheming, more like a Renaissance prince than like a holy bishop. He lived a very luxurious life. He wasn't really caring about those who were needy. Because I want you to hear me say, some popes were. They cared for the needy. They cared for the sick. They cared for those who were hurt. But then there were those who weren't. When you had a bad pope, it just lost more faith in the people. So what you're doing is you're creating this system that is rising up against the people who are learning to rise up against the system. If the system of God and the system of the Bible and Jesus that we believe in was this way, I don't think any one of us would believe. I really don't. I know some of you in this room, you're not well controlled. No one tells you what to do. But can you imagine that someone like this tells you if you're even getting into heaven or not? Leo X was associated with luxury and selling indulgences, which helped fuel the Reformation criticism. Pope Leo X, this is the guy that Luther is the one who's going to basically start to criticize. And so this is who he is and what he's about. So you start to see those guys in that kind of like of realm. Number 7, go to 7. Avignon. Avignon is a place in France. And what happens is there starts to be this disruption. So from 1309 to 1377, the papacy moved from Rome to Avignon, France, making many people think the Pope was captive to French power. Later, there was something called the Western Schism. So while he stayed right here, so he's not too far away from Rome. So here's Rome. They're not too far away. But he just liked it better. He liked his palace better. That was his palace right there, okay? And you can see right here, Avignon and Rome, they start to have this argument. They start to fight. There's now 2 popes. So they re-elect a pope that's there in Rome. So now there's 2 popes. They both excommunicated each other. So they both kicked each other out of heaven. And they basically start this giant war and fight, but this is the blue that is in, all the blue is for the Roman, and all the orange is for the one in Avignon. And so when you see this, Again, this is starting to fracture people's thought toward the Pope. He's obviously not the vicar of God. He's obviously not this great, because look what he's doing. He's now splitting between the two, and now they're following the church. This was called the Western Schism. It just creates an absolute mess. What we actually have in time here in Pisa right here, where the Leaning Tower of Pisa is, we actually start to get a third pope. I don't believe in these two popes. I believe in my own pope, and this is the pope we believe in. And you start to have this pope that actually starts to come about. So in this time period, there were so many people who were saying, if the pope is really the pope, and he really is the vicar of God and the mouthpiece of God, and whatever he says is so holy and so perfect, and it is literally the mouthpiece of God, and if you are that, then why are there three? Why are there two? Why are there those people? If they are really that holy, then there really should just be one. But you could see how they're starting to now doubt the Pope's not really, he's just a man. He's just a man. And so when it comes down to it, this is where the Western Schism is. Look there at the very last thing. It says this shattered the idea that the Pope was clear, a single head of the church, and made the office look divided and political. That this was more about power than it was about anything else. Our early Reformation people that we will talk about next week will highlight this. They will highlight this, and they'll highlight this next one. They'll highlight this. During this time, we have the bubonic plague. We have the Black Plague, whatever you want to call it. The Black Death is what your paper says. This plague killed probably a third of Europe, especially the people that we know in our Christendom. The way it was spread through fleas that went to rats or to cats. I will say cats too. Cats are, if you go to Europe, cats are very prominent because they keep the rats out. And so cities that actually would either have a rat problem or a cat problem. And if one had a rat problem, the cats were coming to go fix that rat problem. So you kind of had this. But the fleas were on both of them. And those fleas then would then bite people, and then it would immediately start to send them into a spiral. But why I say this is because there are if you were to go into a museum, especially a major museum, you are going to see the bubonic plague drawings. They are very, very, you notice them real fast. They're scary. They're going to be skeletons and death. This is what a doctor would wear, and it actually would create. He most likely would die because he actually created he would actually start to breathe the stuff, and it actually would start to it would mess him completely up. What we have here, especially in some of the drawings that you're able to find, is that you're actually able to see the priests are the ones that are dying. So again, the priest would say, the bubonic plague is here because you people are wicked and you people are sinful, and God is punishing you people. So that if you have been unfaithful, or you have not done this, or you've not tithed enough, or you've not given enough, or you're not haven't attended Mass, or maybe some of you are not believers, and so this is why the Black Plague. The Black Plague had about 12 waves. And you could see it did go into England, but you can see it had 12 waves that would come on, and then it would go off. So just imagine that if you and I had a early summer, and 1 out of every 3 people die in our area. I mean, that would be substantial. Those who handled the bodies could still be able to be in contact with some of the fleas, and they would actually still be able to die. People thought they were immune. There was no immunity to this other than don't get near the fleas. There were a lot of plants that people found during this time. My mother-in-law will go off on this. But that's where we get like the idea of why cloves cleans the air. That's where we get a lot of stuff. So y'all essential old people, you're not completely crazy. Just a little bit. But when it comes down to some of this, I think it's really fascinating because we learned a lot about medicine during this horrible time. And but what it did is it created a lot of doubt. People said, God must not be real, the church has no strength, And this is right before the Enlightenment. Right before, when science starts to rise, it rises because people start doubting, is God really good? If he's really good, then why is everybody dying? If the church really believes what it says and it really can keep back all the bad stuff, we keep on giving, people keep on dying. So it puts a lot of doubt in them. Look what it says. It says the plague killed an enormous amount of people. Many priests, monks, and bishops died. And some fled their flocks. They just left. The church could not explain or stop the plague, which weakened the spiritual authority. And the plague left many ordinary people questioning whether the church truly had answers for sin, death, or suffering. This is what brings about the Enlightenment. After this, we will see something called humanism. Humanism. It sounds, I don't use the H. Okay. Humanism. Okay. Humanism. Humanism is, and again, you can have a Christian humanist. Erasmus was. A humanist is someone who believes that we can fix ourselves and do better. And do it like, and what it did was it created this science revolution that we could figure out and explain everything. We don't need to rely on these old fables anymore. We can fix ourselves. Look, he left us at the Black Plague. He didn't pay attention to us, that God that we said we believed in. We can fix our problem. We can exterminate the fleas. We figured out what was wrong. We can fix ourselves. And it creates this not God dependent, but we can just depend on ourselves. In today's world, we see that today. That's the world we live in. But we don't really need the ideas of God. We need the ideas of what man can do. So it brings us to this. Why we reform. So next week, we'll talk about the pre-Reformation. During the time in which I just gave you, there's a couple of men that actually shine. His name is, we're going to talk about John Wycliffe, and we're going to talk about Jan Hus, okay? Both of these men die, and obviously because they're old, but one of them gets burned at the stake. The other one dies of old age, but his bones get pulled back up and thrown out into the river. They really get mad at everything that they do. And so when it comes down to this, we will talk about the beginning of Luther's life. Him being a super, super, super Catholic. Probably the most devout Catholic in the entire world. And where that comes to be. But why do we need reform? It says this, number one, the church had become too wealthy, political, and divided. The church was too powerful. It had too much strength in everybody's life, even the emperors. You could have a different emperor, but you still have the same church. And that church was way strong to what it could be able to do. Number two, the clergy were often corrupt, untrained, or even often more interested in their power or even their money. They really didn't care much about it. The next thing was the papacy. In other words, the Pope was deeply entangled in politics and often focused on control. Indulgences and often other abuses were made grace feel like something that could be bought or even manipulated. So the only way people who were getting into heaven most likely were the rich people. When the rich people were probably the most corrupt. Number five, ordinary people felt spiritually trapped under a system that controlled their conscience and their money. And the last thing, the Bible was almost exclusively in Latin and not available to ordinary people. Your Bible, can you have your Bible? No, you don't have to pull it out. I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank you so much. I'm such a bad person. If you had this then, you would be arrested. Yep. But that you and I hold this every day, we probably don't read it every day. And it is probably the greatest thing that changes everything. This right here, once we're able to read it, common man, ordinary people are able to read this book, everything changes. Everything that you and I know about Christianity would have never been if this system wasn't stopped. That's why the Reformation had to happen. Had to happen. Because if it didn't happen, this would have been, that we would have never had this in our hand. It would still have been in Latin. So what happens is that we start taking this Bible and we start putting it in the language of the common man, and then everything starts changing. Because once you and me are able to read the Bible, we start to have our own relationship with the Lord. It's not salvation through the church. It's salvation through these words that there's a God that wants a relationship with you and me. So why do we, and this is why I always say that we should learn this history, is because it makes us cherish what we have. Cherish what we have. Now, do we have the pretty buildings? We do not have the pretty buildings. But do we need them? I mean, here's the, sure, I'll take one if you got one, I'll take it. I will. But in their world, the church is the system. In our world, the church is this body. It's not this building. It's these people in this room. But that's not the way they looked at it back then. You can see how much of our minds, if we were in this system, we would not know what we know. We would not be able to do what we are able to do because we would not be able to understand the common gospel. So what was the gospel? Think about it. The gospel is that you have an all-knowing, all-loving creator God who created everybody in his image, that he will save. He wants to save those who will love him, care for him, and cherish him. He wants to change their life. He wants to have a relationship with them. That's what it is. He sent his son to die on the cross, that he bore all of the weight of all of those who would believe, and he would give them the righteousness, and that you can go and live your life, and you will be with him in heaven. But forget that. You can be with him. You can be in heaven today as we live for him today. But the greatest thing is that if you lived into this system, the only way you get to heaven is if the church loves you. If the church, you're in good status with the church. You're standing up for the church. You're following those orders and those rules. You're doing the Eucharist. You're able to go to confession. You're doing your Hail Marys. You're doing these things. It is a works-based righteousness. And it's exhausting. Chaos. The only thing that you and I have is our sin. And that's the only thing we bring into our salvation. And God changes us and molds us and makes us this new person. That the old person is gone and the new person is here. And we would have never heard that if we weren't able to read our own Bible. Think about the things that they probably taught. They taught what would hold people down and control them. So those who could read and could hear, they taught them that. Instead of those things that say you're free, that's a different thing. Any questions? Any questions on this? Yes, sir.
A question on the Purgatory book.
Mm-hmm.
That came out. What was the name of that book?
Maccabees chapter 12. It's part of the Apocrypha. You probably can look it up. It's probably online. It's Maccabees.
And who wrote it?
Jewish people so it's written during the intertestamental time. So it's in between the Old and the New Testament. It is the history of the Maccabean people as they rise up and help the Romans. And that's how because of the books of Maccabees, that's how they become the Jews become good shape with the Romans while the Romans are occupying Jerusalem. So the reason why the relationship between the Romans and the Jews are there is because of the Maccabean revolution. Good question.
Was limbo included in that?
I don't know.
Their belief in limbo?
I don't know. If I don't know, I will tell you I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
But during this time frame, where are the Jesus people? Where are the people that are believing in Jesus and following Christ, not what the church says?
They're not there. Most people who were not able to read during that time, they weren't able to have a Bible. Most of these people were being held up and propped up by the book. There would be resistance. Every once in a while you would have a resistance. We'll talk all about resistance next week. Those that did, especially like when Wycliffe is able to start this resistance, there's going to be a group called the Lollards. They're called the Ramblers, is what Lollard means. But they will soon, the system will snuff them out and kill them. I mean, they will exterminate any problem whatsoever. And so what's weird is about the Catholic Church will not kill a person, but they will send the government because they have the power over the government to go and snuff you out. And so the power and the strength. So these reformers, and I think you're hitting a nail on the head. These reformers had to have guts like nothing else. Like Luther, he's a crazy person. Luther's crazy, okay? But Luther had to be crazy, okay? Because there's no one who could have stood up to what Luther stood up to without being a little crazy. Some of these guys that leave these resistances, the other day I was reading about William Wallace, and like William Wallace was supposedly a psychopath, and he killed so many people. And if anybody crossed him, he murdered you. Like he killed these things. Some of these men in history that we look up to, or even say, "Oh man, he's cool. I like that movie." We're actually celebrating some people who are actually pretty crazy.
Gotta be crazy to think some grape juice or some wine's gonna turn into Jesus' blood. Real crazy.
I'm not going to say that. But I want you to hear me say this. You are there are Baptist people who believe that we are not Protestants in this. I completely disagree. We are Protestants. We are Protestants to this kind of tyranny because we believe that you are justified in the sight of God through faith and faith alone. So what's going to come out of this is going to be the 5 solaces. So the 5 solaces will be the thing that comes out of this as we start to go this. Because once these educated men who the church is educating, and then they start to go to universities, which the church created these universities, which is called scholasticism. Once this all starts to happen, then these men who have a lot of guts read these Bibles, read these things, and they say, "No, I don't believe what the church says." But to say that would be so scary. It would be. It would be. We're talking about John Wycliffe next week. John Wycliffe, literally, if he didn't have the connections he had, he would have been murdered immediately. But he had so many good connections, knew all the rich people in England. And England itself is so far away from like the Pope that they would be like, "Oh, those crazy people out there in the frontier," not knowing that England would become England, you know. But this is during their great kingdoms and their great stuff. They're about to start. This is right after all their fights with France, where England and France will go back and forth. So yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Yeah, one group of people that's good to study is the Waldensians.
Yeah.
I was going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Prior to the Reformation.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of years prior. Like they were original.
Yeah, they would be the guys who
It's
like.
like an answer to your question about where were the Jesus people. The Waldensians are great stuff.
And that's what's hard though is to say that I think some of these people were Jesus people. I think they were legit people who loved the Lord and loved God and loved the Bible that were in the Catholic Church. I still think there is today. I still think that you can be saved by grace through faith in the church of the Catholic Church if you love Jesus more than you love the church. If you're saved through Jesus and not Mary, like if you're saved through these things, then you can be saved in any church, even the Mormon church, which is crazier. But what I want you to think about is there's still Christianity. You know what I mean? It's still Christ. And that's why if it was up to man, I think our whole religion would probably have fell apart. I think God is the one who wrote this whole story of history, who got all the way here. I think he's so sovereign that he made this happen so that we'd have a reconnection with what the real gospel is. Because once man was able to read the Bible, the gospel became so much more clear and so much more like beautiful. It wasn't something you did. It was something he did for you, you know, and it became this super, super beautiful story. So I think it's another reason why the Bible is probably in the Catholic Church in some ways, if they could have destroyed, I mean, this is what they did, and you'll see this, we'll talk about this. They destroyed Bibles. Like if you wrote a Bible in your language and gave it to people, they would go in and destroy every Bible. That the Catholic Church did not want you to read the Bible. Because if you did, you would come up with your own thoughts and understand what they would what they were doing. And that's how they controlled you. So, and let me say this. It's good clarification. The Catholic Church is the unified, universal church. We are the Catholic Church, all of us. We're a unified church with all those who are saints and believers. They would call it the Roman Church or the Roman Catholic Church that creates the 7 sacraments and creates this kind of theology. So, cool? Anything else? Any other questions? Again, I'm not hating people. Does everybody understand this? I'm just telling you history, okay? There's no reason to leave here going, he hates them all. No, I don't. I don't. I have a lot of friends that are Catholic. And some of y'all I know have been or you were or you came from a Catholic school. I love you too. I promise you. Yeah, you just tell the story. That's all you do. You just tell the story. Yeah. I'll be mean about Luther in 2 weeks. I promise you. I'll wear him out. Anything else? Hey, let me pray, and I'll let you go. Let me pray. God, thank you today. God, thank you for these people. Thank you for their hearts. God, I pray, Lord, that today we have not, I pray, Lord, that we've been gentle and kind. And that, Lord, I pray, Lord, that people would understand that this is the history of why we're here in this room today. And that's why it's important that we know of where we came from. That we understand that this is what starts even America. That without the Protestant Reformation, there is no America. And God, I pray that we would just understand that this is all about you. And God, you saw this through all the time, and that you hold it all together. Lord, we believe you, and we love you. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Also, during this time, there's also the age of exploration. You'll see a lot of people, this is when you start discovering America. So.